The map that lies: brine, altitude, and vanishing water. Everyone talks about 3 countries. Don't think flags. Think one high plateau stitched by wind, rock, and closed basins that don't drain to the sea. The Lithium Triangle is a single hydrologic system broken into salas, salt flats, where ancient lakes left pockets of brine. That matters because what happens in one basin can echo next door through groundwater and climate, even if the border says otherwise. So brine versus ore. Hard rock mines blast and crush spodumene, then roast. Brines do chemistry with time. You pump salty water rich in lithium, spread it in shallow ponds, and let the sun slowly drive off water. As volume shrinks, salts crystallize out in steps. You push the brine down a cascade. Halite, then sylvite, then carnallite, shifting the ionic soup until lithium can finally be recovered and refined to carbonate or hydroxide. But here's the thing, that neat cascade rests on delicate evaporation kinetics. The brochure promise is simple: the Atacama sun works like a free factory. The reality at altitude is different. The air pressure is low, water boils easier, but mass transfer across cold, thin air doesn't act like sea level. Days get hot, nights get cold, often below zero. Freeze, thaw cycles form thin ice skins that block evaporation, then break, then refreeze. Those swings mess with coprecipitation. Magnesium, sulfate, and boron tag along when you don't want them. Each impurity you carry downstream costs reagents later: lime, soda ash, acids, and burns time you can't buy back. Let's talk basic water math. To make a ton of lithium carbonate equivalent, you're not just moving lithium. You're moving and evaporating thousands of tons of water-laden brine across months. Freshwater also shows up in the balance: washing salts, dissolving reagents, scrubbing equipment, crystallizing final product. The exact liters per kilogram depend on chemistry and process, but in a hyperarid place, any extra cubic meter matters. Drought creates cones of depression in the brine aquifer. Because brine and freshwater often couple hydraulically, you can pull sweet water toward the salt nucleus, creeping salinity into community wells. Altitude stacks another tax. Pumps work harder in thin air. Diesel engines lose power. Workers move slower, safety margins narrow. And because the nights are cold, you lose heat from ponds and pipes. Energy you plan for reaction rates, it's bleeding to the sky. The evaporation calendar is not your financial quarter, it's the plateau's seasons. Frost events can reset an entire pond train. Heavy summer rains, rare but real, dilute months of concentration in days. That's not a delay. It's a rerun. Immediate bottleneck: it isn't geology, it's rights and physics. To pump brine you need permits. To bring in freshwater you need separate rights. Indigenous communities rely on shallow wells and springs that also depend on the same regional water budget. Monitoring wells tell one story, trust often tells another. In some salas, companies argue brine is mineral, not water, and should be regulated differently. Communities look at dropping water tables and flamingo breeding cycles and say, call it what you want, the springs are fading. Here's the crazy part: the famous reserves numbers don't solve any of this. The triangle looks huge on paper because brine volumes and lithium grades add up across basins, but supply is not a volume problem, it's a pace problem. Evaporation ponds are time factories. You can't double the sun or halve winter. You can build more ponds, sure, but each pond still needs months to work through a chemistry that won't be rushed. Add more trains, and you also add more points where weather can knock you off spec. Reagents and logistics sneak in as silent governors. Soda ash, lime, acids, they come by road over mountain passes or through cramped Pacific ports. One stuck conv, a winter road closure, and your purity targets slip. At altitude, a single-lane switchback with a jackknife tanker isn't a story. It's a week lost. And because the brine chemistry varies even within the same sala, you can't standardize your recipe like a factory line. The operators earn their keep by tweaking every day. So when you see a corporate slide say, nameplate 50,000 tons per year, ask 2 questions. What's the brine grade and impurity ratio? And what is the real hydrology calendar? If magnesium is high, your lime bill goes up, your waste stream grows, and your ponds slow. If winters are longer or colder than modeled, take another quarter off the ramp. If communities withhold consent, your pumps stay off while your debt clock keeps ticking. Let's reframe this map. Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, yes, they write the rules, but the plateau writes the schedule. The central question for the whole story is simple. Can the triangle deliver at the speed the world wants without breaking the water that keeps the plateau alive? The stakes are plain. If the answer is no, phones cost more, EVs stall, grid batteries slip, and traders start pricing spot lithium by the level of brine ponds and the snow on nearby peaks. From these physical limits, we walk straight into promises. Public timelines, glossy reserves, and quarterly targets collide with weather and wells. In a minute, we'll test the paper against the ponds. The promise: paper reserves versus real production. On paper, the triangle looks solved. Thick reserve numbers, glossy decks, and a sea of zeros. But wait, there's more. Reserves are not bags on a pallet. They're a probability that under certain prices and tech, you could one day produce. Proven is tighter than probable, recoverable is smaller than in situ, and ramp rate is the trap nobody wants to print. Markets love totals, chemistry only cares about flow. Nameplate capacity is the favorite trick. A slide says 50,000 tons per year. Investors nod. But here's the thing. Nameplate assumes steady-state brine grade, stable impurity ratios, and a pond circuit that never resets. Real ponds breathe with weather. If magnesium creeps up, you dose more lime. That makes more waste and drags your residence time. If sulfate spikes, you co-precipitate the wrong salts and have to recycle stages. The number still sits on the slide. The field guys just work Fridays. Get ready for this. In these high basins, a single rain or frost event can reset an entire cascade. Operators call it losing the train. You don't just lose a day, you send a huge volume back to earlier ponds to reconcentrate, or you hold it while solids settle. Either way, your quarter's timing is cooked. Corporate calendars say Q2, hydrology says see you next summer. Now impurities. Everyone quotes lithium grade, but the Mg/Li ratio is the silent governor. Lower is better. Atacama sits far lower than Uni, which is why the world's cheapest barrels come from Chile. High magnesium means more reagents, more scaling, more filtrations, and a higher odds of off-spec intermediate brine. Each tweak echoes down the line. Your soda ash truck is late, fine, carbonate purity slips, and you rework product. Your acid shipment misses a window. You stop cleaning heat exchangers, and foul rates jump. Paper never includes the truck that never came. Timelines get even weirder when finance meets weather. Boards want quarter-on-quarter growth. Ponds want seasons. You can front-load capex, build fast, and still wait 9 to 12 months for a first full circuit. And if your first season is cold, your first production press release may be drums from a pilot line, not a real steady-state output. That's not a lie, it's a framing. But the grid doesn't run on framing. Here's the crazy part. When prices spike, bad projects get greenlit. The elasticity trap, spot jumps, juniors flood the market with P-slides, and capital chases the fastest to nameplate. Communities see dollar signs and also risk. Hermits fly faster, and so do lawsuits. Social blowback can turn your IRR inside out. Even if you keep your license, a road blockade will drop your effective utilization below any spreadsheet. This is why cost curve models quietly carry a logistics haircut. Rain and frost aren't the only reset buttons. Brine chemistry drifts within the same cellar as you pump. Early wells look great. Later wells creep closer to the nucleus and pull more impurities. You shift hole patterns, rebalance pumps, and hope monitoring wells catch the cone of depression spread before community wells taste salt. Meanwhile, your reserve model, based on a neat grid and historic samples, meets a fluid you are actively moving. It's like forecasting traffic while you're opening new lanes in real time. Corporate guidance also clashes with reagent math. Lime, soda ash, hydrochloric acid, antiscalants all need freight, storage, and tight handling at altitude. A mountain pass closes for a storm, and your just-in-time becomes not in time. Ports on the Pacific handle copper first, then everything else. Acid and soda ash compete for berth windows. One backlog ripples to multiple sellers, which ripple to multiple offtake contracts, which land in battery plant schedules. You won't see that chain on page 2 of a deck. Let's talk offtake. Contracts turn paper into bankable revenue, but they can be boomerangs. Take or pay locks an automaker to tons you may not have in a bad winter. Miss deliveries, pay penalties, renegotiate price floors, and suddenly your secured revenue funds your own delay. Traders know this. They warehouse carbonate and hydroxide, watch weather in the Puna, and time releases into thin markets. That optionality looks like supply to a model and like leverage to a human. So what's real? Real is a ramp that bows, not a straight line. Real is a nameplate you eventually touch in a warm, wind-steady year, then slip under when frost bites. Real is a pond circuit that needs 9 months to breathe, with crews who save quarters by catching a co-precipitation front hours before it runs. Real is hydrology calendars stapled to board calendars and the staples bending. Paper reserves say abundance. The ponds answer with pace. And until those align, chemistry, weather, logistics, and consent, the promise stays ink, not tonnage. Chile, drought, depletion, and the Atacama equation. Chile is where the theory meets its limit. Salar de Atacama has world-class lithium grades and sun that barely blinks, and still the bottleneck isn't geology, it's water and trust. The basin sits in a hyper-arid belt where whole years pass with a handful of storm days. Every cubic meter you move shows up somewhere else as an argument. Start with the split most people miss: brine versus freshwater. Operators pump brine from the salt nucleus for lithium, and they also draw separate freshwater from peripheral aquifers for washing, reagents, and camps. On paper, those are two systems. Underground, they talk to each other. Create a persistent cone of depression in the brine, and you can drag gradients that tug on freshwater, shifting the balance that feeds springs and wetlands at the margins. That's not a headline. It's a quiet, steady tilt. Now layer on drought. Northern Chile has been in a multi-decade dry stretch. Glaciers in the high Cordillera are shrinking, snowlanes creep up, and recharge windows get shorter. Monitoring wells around Atacama have shown declines in some zones, and while companies point to management changes, communities see flamingo colonies pulse with food stress and nesting failures. The data is messy and spatially uneven, which is exactly why the argument never ends. One transect looks stable, another shows drops, and nobody trusts the other side's instruments. Here's where it gets interesting. Atacama's brine grade and low magnesium made it the cheapest pond system on Earth. That early success set expectations, but cheap doesn't mean consequence-free. As extraction scaled, the evaporation area ballooned, reagent trucks multiplied, and water debates got political. National agencies tightened reporting. NGOs flew drones over ponds. Indigenous councils organized basin walks and posted salinity logs from their wells. A technical dispute became a legitimacy fight. You feel that in contract rooms. Chile's national lithium strategy shifted control toward the state, with Codelco and other public actors expected to hold equity or operate partnerships. Legacy contracts, Albemarle and SQM, run on time clocks that now intersect with new rules, new quotas, and new expectations for brine and freshwater balance. Every renegotiation mixes production targets with water ceilings, biodiversity offsets, and monitoring obligations that have to work in real time, not just at audit. The politics would be tough even with smooth logistics. They're not smooth. Everything narrow funnels through the Pacific. The ports of Antofagasta and Medellin are efficient but finite, and copper is king on the coast. Soda ash, lime, hydrochloric acid, and filtration media share berth slots and tank storage with acids bound for copper leach pads. One backlog and your purification sequence slips because a single reagent missed its window. Upstream, the highways cross desert ranges with long single-lane segments where a breakdown doesn't detour, it waits. The plateau may be dry, but fog banks and wind can still shut a pass. Depletion isn't a cliff, it's a shape. Brine drawdown can reduce pore pressure, slow lateral inflow from the salar margins, and change the density stratification that helped keep higher impurity zones separated. Operators respond by shifting well fields, adjusting pump rates, even trialing reinjection of spent brine at depth. Reinjection sounds neat and often helps, but placement matters. Inject too close to production wells and you short-circuit the system, spiking impurities. Inject in the wrong layer and you push salinity fronts in ways you didn't plan. Communities hear reinjection and ask, what chemistry, what layer, show the tracer tests. Trust is the binding reagent and it's in short supply. Company dashboards can show real-time flows, but when a community's spring pulses lower for season, the graph on a laptop loses to lived memory. Chile's regulators have expanded public reporting, independent audits, and satellite-based water balance work. That helps, but the lag between action and effect, months to years in a basin this size, means disputes live a long time. Meanwhile, production targets don't wait. Nameplate in Atacama still looks strong, but the operational window narrowed. Daytime winds that once felt like free evaporation now peel heat off ponds and sling dust into intakes. Nights sharpen, forcing heaters on lines you didn't plan to heat at that scale. Add a frost run, and the brine train steps back 2 boxes. Even the best operators budget for seasonal dips, and the floor isn't as high as the slide deck from 5 years ago. Chile's advantage is also its risk: concentration. So much midstream conversion, export know-how, and supplier networks sit within a few coastal districts that a localized port stoppage, a strike, or a hazardous materials incident ties knots in every schedule tied to Atacama. Benchmark watchers see it instantly in spot pricing. Automakers feel it weeks later in cathode plants running lean inventories by design. So where does the Atacama equation land? World-class grade meets worst-case water politics. Projects survive by proving, with instruments and outcomes, that brine drawdown and freshwater buffers can coexist without draining the living edge of the Sala. That proof has to be continuous, co-managed, and conservative enough to ride a harsher climate baseline. And even if you solve the hydrology to everyone's standard, you still live on roads and ports that don't bend for quarter ends. Cross the border and the rules flip. In Argentina, permits are easier and timelines friendlier, but the chemistry is harder. The currency wobbles, and altitude turns hype into power and water bills. Argentina, easy permits, hard chemistry. Crossing into Argentina, the first thing you feel is speed. Provincial governors cut ribbons. Environmental files move in months, not years. Juniors plant flags on a dozen salas at once. From Salta to Jujuy to Catamarca, the message is simple: bring capital, bring jobs, let's move. And they do move, roads scraped, camps go up fast, well pads drilled before the ink dries. It looks like the antidote to Chile's gridlock. But here's the thing: permits can run, chemistry walks. Argentina's salas are scattered and variable. Hombre Muerto, Olaroz, Corchari, Sal de Vida, Pastos Grandes, the names sound the same until you pour samples. Lithium grades bounce, and the magnesium to lithium ratios jump even faster. Some pockets look friendly, others are magnesium soup. That ratio is the headache. High Mg means more lime, more soda ash, more filters, and more steps where you can foul equipment or drag impurities forward. It also means each frost night hits you harder because your residence times are already long. Currency makes it worse. Projects raise dollars but spend pesos, then need dollars again for reagents. Capital controls trap cash. Import permits for lime, soda ash, ion exchange resins, membranes, and acids become mini-boss fights. A shipment can sit at port over paperwork mismatch or a quota cap. Meanwhile, the peso slides. Contractors reprice. Diesel goes up. Your pond train doesn't care about macro, it just starves for chemicals that aren't there. Logistics stack the tax. Salas sit above 3,500 meters. The roads snake through passes that ice over in winter. When they close, they close. You can't pay snow off a high plateau. Pumps that should hum at sea level gasp in thin air. Diesel generators derate. Your forklift doesn't lift as much. Every ton of lime is a winch job and a risk on a single-lane shelf road. A burn break on one tanker stalls a whole day's flow of inbound reagents. And because each sala's chemistry is its own soup, you can't pool inventory like a factory cluster. The wrong grade of soda ash for one process is just weight on a trailer. Here's where it gets interesting. Direct lithium extraction shows up like a shortcut. No ponds, faster cycles, lower land use. Operators pitch sorbents, ion exchange beads, solvent extraction trains. Pilot skids run in shipping containers with smart valves and neat dashboards. Early press says months become days. And sometimes in a lab that's true, but DLE is a system, not a module. It trades land and time for power and water. At altitude, power is not a footnote. You need steady megawatts for pumps, heaters, and regeneration. The grid is thin, unstable in spots, and far from many salas. So you bring diesel or LNG, add gensets, and watch your OPEX and carbon tick up. Water is the other shoe. Most DLE chemistries need large volumes for wash, rinse, and sorbent regeneration. You can design loops to recycle, you can target brine reinjection to stabilize pressure, but nothing is free. Every cubic meter has to come from and go somewhere. Reinjection in a layered silo at elevation is engineering plus geology plus luck. Inject in the wrong horizon and you shuttle impurities back to your pump field. Miss your pressure balance and you change flows to community wells faster than a pond circuit ever would. Magnesium never leaves the stage. In DLE, high Mg brines load sorbents with junk, shorten cycle life, and spike reagent use for cleaning. That means more acid, more caustic, more truck trips, more tanks to store chemicals at altitude. Your warehouse starts to look like a chemical terminal with wind storms. And the filter presses that catch fines after regeneration, they don't like freeze, thaw. A cold snap will cake cloths, slow filtrate, and reset your fast cycle to a crawl. Finance meets weather in awkward ways here too. Argentina's friendlier permits pull timelines forward. Boards expect earlier revenue. But even a DLE-first project still needs brine fields, pipelines, ponds for waste salts or polishing, and long procurement for specialized equipment. Currency swings push suppliers to demand dollars up front. Local inflation makes peso budgets stale in weeks. You hedge, but then a winter storm closes a pass, and your just-in-time membranes sit 3 weeks short of sight. Diesel dependence ties everything together. You burn it to lift brine, to heat process streams, to move trucks. When prices jump, your margin thins. When a strike hits a refinery or a convoy route, your uptime drops. And every extra liter burned makes your ESG slide a little harder to defend. Communities look at your generator stacks, then at the spring they use down valley, and the story gets tougher. So what survives? Projects with the cleanest brine chemistry, moderate magnesium and shared infrastructure, power lines, reagent depots, maintained roads tend to endure. Modular phasing helps because you can pause between increments and match lessons to the next skid. The ones that struggle, high Mg salas far from grid tie-ins, with winter-closed roads and dollar-heavy reagent diets. Paper plans say commission in Q4. The plateau says, see you when the pass reopens. Bolivia, the paradox of plenty. Bolivia looms huge on the map. Salar de Uyuni is a white ocean, bigger than some countries, shimmering under a thin, brutal sky. On paper, it's the motherlode. In practice, it's a riddle. The grade isn't the killer, it's the ratio. Magnesium to lithium here runs off the charts compared to Chile. That single number turns a cheap sun factory into a chemistry slog. State control shapes the whole arc. Bolivia keeps lithium as a national project, not just a mine. The idea is value at home, brine to carbonate to cathode to cells, with partners who bring tech but not the keys. Sounds smart, keep the upside, keep the sovereignty. But here's the thing. When you're the gatekeeper, you're also the speed limit. Tech partners cycle in and out. Memorandums of understanding become pilot plants that never quite become steady state. You get ribbon cuttings, not reliable tons. Pilot plant purgatory looks like progress until you zoom out. You see modules running for months, making product in drums, announcing purity specs. Then comes the scale jump. Piping grows, tanks multiply. The same chemistry now needs more power, more water, tighter controls, and faster maintenance at 3,600 meters in air that eats engines and freezes anything not moving. Filters blind, sorbents foul, heaters trip. The fixes that work in a lab skid stall in a winter squall. Magnesium is the steady villain. High Mg means heavy lime demand, constant cleaning, and sludge streams that need drying and disposal. In evaporation, it shows up as carnallite headaches and coprecipitation losses. In direct lithium extraction, it loads media with junk and shortens cycles. Either way, you're shipping more reagents up, moving more waste around, and losing hours you can't buy back. A missed acid truck isn't a rounding error, it's a cascade. Water and altitude compound it. Uni isn't just high, it's exposed. Nights bite hard, days glare. Frost rims pond edges and slows residence time right when you need steady concentration. If you try DLE to dodge ponds, you trade land for megawatts and fresh water. The grid is thin, so you roll in diesel or chase a gas spur that takes years. Wash streams need recycling, reinjection needs geology to cooperate, and every cubic meter you push back underground has to land in the right layer at the right pressure, or you're salting your own intake. Politics sets the tempo. Communities here read the plateau before they read a prospectus. Water is identity and insurance. Meetings run long. Consent isn't a checkbox, It's a relationship that resets if a spring sputters or a truck spills. Sovereignty is not a slogan, it's a veto on terms that feel extractive. Add national elections, minister changes, and court rulings, and you get a project timeline braided with politics. A deal inked in summer can stall by winter on a procedural challenge that wasn't on anyone's Gantt chart. Here's the crazy part, even the ground moves weird. Uni has a thick salt crust, hard enough for tourists in 4x4s, soft enough to surprise you after rain. Under that crust, brine mobility is its own animal. Heavy traffic, rigs, tankers can flex layers, change fracture paths, and nudge brine flow. It's not dramatic, it's cumulative. You push on a system that looks still and discover it's elastic. Wells that behaved last season drift off spec. Your model lags because the act of producing rewrites the map. Evaporation ponds versus DLE isn't a tech war, it's a resource budget fight. Ponds are slower but light on external power. DLE is faster on paper but heavy on energy and water. At altitude, with logistics that kink when a pass ices, fast is fragile. Lose a generator, foul a resin bed, or miss a chemical shipment, and your headline advantage collapses into downtime that's hard to claw back. The paradox is brutal. The bigger the salar, the stronger the pull to scale fast. The harsher the setting, the more it punishes that impulse. Social contract sits in the middle. Bolivia wants the full stack, lithium that lifts wages, builds plants, and keeps decisions in La Paz, Potosi, and Uyuni. That means more steps on site, more water use on site, more power on site. It also means more points of failure in thin air. You can design around a lot closed loops, smarter reinjection, wind and solar with storage. But every mitigation touches the same constraints you started with: altitude, water, cold. So what works here? Patience, modular builds, and brutal chemistry honesty. Start smaller, prove a train through a full year, log every frost reset and reagent swing, then copy the exact unit, not the dream. Share roads, share tanks, share power spines so a single outage doesn't cascade. Publish water balances that communities can audit in real time. And pick partners who can live with politics that changes the terms midstream without packing up the pilot and flying home. Uni is plenty on paper. In practice, it's a long conversation between physics and pride. If those two line up, Bolivia becomes a pillar. If they don't, the world's biggest salt flat stays a mirror, with everyone staring at what could be and not enough moving out the gate. Root cause window.